Hello, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing this now moment with myself and with one another. I'm just going to close this. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back if you have. My intention is oneness and unity and benevolence for all. I'm just going to talk a little bit about a session that I had with the beautiful light worker. I'm going to talk a little bit about the message that came through in this session and in reference to a lot of the messages that I've been receiving. And then we'll see where this goes. I might do a follow-up video. So a couple videos, it's video day. All right, so let me just back up, and I want to share from my heart that things are integrating so quickly for all of us. And the reason I was guided to share this session is because this session that I had was with a healer. So for those of you who resonate with the word healer, I just want to back up right there and say all of us are healers from my perspective. And let me back up even more and say this entire video is from my perspective, my highest self or my highest aspect, and what comes through in my own way. Everybody has their own path to follow. So having said that, we are all healers. We all are healed. We all heal one another. And we are all already perfect. And in perfection, we don't need to be healed because there is no real healing going on. All we are doing is essentially remembering who we are. We are remembering and feeling into our expansiveness when we are healed or participate in healing with others. And I like to refer to healing as a creative collaboration of expansiveness, because all we're doing is essentially opening up to our potential. And so as we do this together, sometimes it's helpful to have another light worker or being assist us in our journey to remember who we are. So we all get stuck from time to time. We all forget our own expansiveness, and we all fall into, well, many of us do, I won't say all, but that's what we do in this human journey. We forget, and then we remember. And as we remember, we begin to heal the fragments and become more whole. And that essentially is what we're doing. So I have worked with other healers to assist me in my journey because I enjoy it and it's fun and it becomes expansive, and I begin to remember other things and vice versa. So in my session work, my healing modality shifts all the time. I bring through, and I'm sharing this because what I've been seeing in the collective energy, a lot of people are being shaken up and are, especially healers that have been doing this a really long time, that haven't necessarily transitioned as easily as others. And this is all from love and non-judgment. Some of us are resisting more than others, right? I went through huge resistance 3 years ago and became really sick because of it. And I learned so much through that journey, and that's part of what I bring when I share this with everybody in my journey. So there's a lot of light workers and healers out there that feel like they don't know who they are anymore. They don't feel that they're the same person anymore because we aren't. And that can be really scary, especially for some, again, who might have been doing this a really long time. So I want to back up and say that we all like to have validation that we're on the right track, or that what the messages that we're getting are right. And sometimes that's what we do for each other. I've had sessions with other light workers, meaning I go to them and have them tell me things, and I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking, but I thought I was crazy, or I didn't know if that was really what I was hearing, and I was having trouble differentiating between the ego and my highest aspect, because we all go through that at different times in our lives. So that's what we're assisting each other in doing. And I want to also back up with the healing. We heal or assist each other in making whole just by us holding space. We can go into a grocery store, and by us being in love or bliss or in coherence, others are then, they pick up on those signals, and it essentially helps shake off things that they didn't know they might have even been holding on to. So we're all healers, whether we do it intentionally or unintentionally. We all assist one another in remembering just by us holding frequency. So this particular light worker, so I'm going to back up. I've been guided over and over again to let go and not hook into any particular frequency, any particular deity, any particular entity, person, place, or thing. I am truly in the process of embodying my multidimensionality. That can be really challenging at times, especially because I was so stuck and resistant when I first began this journey based on things that I had experienced as a child, previous lifetimes, future lifetimes, etc. The reason I'm sharing this in this way, by the way, is like telling a story. And there are people who are storytellers. Shamans tell the story so that people can learn through the experience. So I just wanted to share that as well. And that's what a lot of us are doing by getting on and sharing our stories, which I'm not sharing my story. I'm just talking about the healing modalities and how they've shifted. So while I started out as a Reiki healer and a light worker in 2011 and yoga teacher in 2012, all that and who I was then is completely different with who I am now. Yet if I would have tried to stay in that modality and not expand out and branch out, then that would have created, and it did, so much resistance that it was difficult for me to spread my wings, so to speak. And that's what's happening across the board for a lot of light workers who have done tarot reading, palm reading, connection with the archangels, connection with the ascended masters, connection with all kinds of beings. The biggest message that comes through for me is we are them and they are us. We are truly embodying the fifth dimensional aspect. And in doing that, we don't need to go through or call in another being for our answers. We could, it's fun, and we can choose to connect. But what we're being guided to do is connect as them. So let me come back to that. I'm being guided to share that the necessity to hone in on a particular anything as our only guide is an old paradigm. Got the cardinal talking with us. When we call in our ancestors or our guides, while we have our ancestors and guides, what my team shows me is that it is so beyond what we see from a linear perspective. In addition to that, as above, so below. So as we ascend, so do they. Therefore, there becomes a point when our old concept of who they are, what they represent, also needs to shift and change with them. So I used, I won't name any names, but let's say we all associate with a particular archangel, and that particular archangel has a particular, I don't know what they're called, but like talisman, right? And you guys, by the way, I have used talismans and called in archangels and done all of that in the beginning of when I started on this journey. And it was very helpful, and this is all from non-judgment. I love all of these beings, and these beings love us. Okay, so let me just back up. While that was really a useful tool when we were in a certain frequency, that tool is not necessarily as useful in the same way as it once was. In addition to that, what they showed me is it's like a video game. You start off in a video game and you have, let's say, I don't play video games really, but I used to play, let's say, Sonic the Hedgehog. I barely remember this, by the way, or Mario Brothers or whatever. And you get like a coin, and then when you use that coin, then you get an extra superpower. You're not always stuck with only that one talisman to use forever. There's multiple talismans because there's multiple layers, because you're a multidimensional being. So therefore, so are these archetypes, right? So these certain archangels that have, let's say, a sword or a caduceus or a staff, those are all helpful, but those are a linear representation and presentation of a multidimensional tool. That truly, if we understood the multidimensionality of it, we wouldn't necessarily continue to limit our imagination on just that tool and how it works. So that's one version of what I'm being guided to share. So I'll go on to this. So while they expand, they pick up other tools. While they expand, they shift into other more expansive representations of a collective that they're honing into, just as we are. So I shift all of the time from different colors and different flowers and different galactic representations of myself. I'm not only going to hone into the Arcturian energy, because that would be a limiting structure. And that would then be a linear representation, because the Arcturian energy isn't just Arcturian. I'm using this as an example. This makes sense. So I was guided to share this. I was also guided through this to talk a little bit about kind of how I work. And the reason is it's a storytelling. So I generally will, before I have a session with someone, write down on a piece of paper messages that come through before I meet with this person. And then I may or may not discuss or share this message with them after our session or during our session. I've been guided not to get attached to sharing the message or not sharing the message. I've been guided to not get attached to anything that comes through, because when I write these messages down, sometimes they are very multidimensional and they do not make sense on a linear level. So I'll back up. I had thought, well, I need to establish a system. This system is write down their energy, have the session, talk about things that will help them, share the message, etc., etc., point by point. And as soon as I anchored that in as my system, it didn't work anymore. Stopped working. All of a sudden, I wasn't getting any messages on paper. I would get them in the session. So I have been guided time and time again to not have a system in this particular modality with my own experience. For others, they need a system because it really works for them. For myself, my guidance team was like, you're limiting yourself by having an expectation that something has to come through in writing. When with this person, that won't work for them, and it doesn't matter because it will come through during the session. I was also guided that part of the reason I wanted to do the writing is because it made it more linear for me and my third dimensional brain to wrap around. What does that word mean? I wonder. And as soon as I started to do that, it took me out of my right brain and took me into my logic, which then cuts that up and doesn't allow the two to connect. So I'm sharing this because as soon as I was like, you know what, if something comes through, great. If something doesn't come through, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to trust that whatever is most in alignment for whatever this person needs now is going to come through. Everything opened for me, and it just works. And ever since then, I have a tendency to always write a note before I meet with the person. The reason I'm sharing this is what the message is. A lot of light workers and healers out there have adapted a certain modality, and they feel stuck, or they feel like they're not expanding enough because they're not letting go of that. For example, let's say a person's a channeler and they've always connected with Archangel Michael. I'm using him as an example and now they're not getting the answers anymore. It's not because Archangel Michael isn't communicating with them. It's that they are hooking into a certain concept of who and what and how Archangel Michael communicates. When I even say Archangel Michael, many people will conjure up a concept of a man with a sword, back to that talisman, and the way that they look. Because in their mind, that's how they looked to them when they were doing the channeling. However, what's being shown to me is this concept of Archangel Michael is just a very linear presentation, because Archangel Michael is not only masculine. So as we expand and we combine our divine feminine and divine masculine, this also expands into our not trajectory, I'll come back to that in a minute, but that as above, so below. So we're doing it, so are they. And so this concept of what and who this particular entity looks like has shifted. It always has been different. It has always been more expansive, but they've brought, I use the archangels as an example, a linearization down to us so that we could conceptualize our experience with them and make it easier for us to communicate. Does that make sense? So while that is not a wrong presentation of this particular entity, it isn't necessarily the fullest expansive presentation of who, what this entity is and how they work and how expansive they truly are. Also, when we represent a sword, that has a certain linear presentation, black and white presentation of what that does. We see a sword as a tool to cut. And while that is true to one extent, it's well beyond that. So we're being invited to let go of that need to hook into that certain belief system about that certain reality structure entity. And this is not just in regards to this particular entity. I'm just using he, she, it, the collective of the Michael consciousness, as an example. This could be Buddha, it could be certain elementals, it could be anything, really. Because what I was guided to share is, as we let go of our conceptualization and putting them into a box, it opens up the box and it allows our ideas and concepts of them to expand. Therefore, how we communicate with them expands as well. And it allows them to further, like, they're going to expand with or without us, but we certainly all help each other out. So they help us, right, as we help them. So the other message that came through, so I'm just going to go into this a little bit in this session. So as we let go of our need to control how our modalities and how our communication is with our guidance team, and as we let go of our need to control the way that we communicate, the more expansive we become. So sometimes when we're in resistance, okay, so the messages that are coming through and how we receive them are changing. Many of us have already gone through this, but some of us are going through this right now. So all of a sudden, we're not getting our messages. We're not feeling the energy come through in our hands. We're not understanding in the same way that we were before, because that has shifted. And what the picture that they keep showing and that they've always shown me, they, which is a collective consciousness of me, and that's a whole other video, but is integrate, 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 now. So the less I linearize my experiences and conversations, the more I bring in. Same thing with all healers. And I'm using healer as a very linear term. So our multidimensional selves. The message that, so I'll back up just for a moment. So being open to these messages. So this particular light worker reached out to me to through a friend to do a healing session. And I didn't know anything about this particular light worker other than they were a Reiki master and they were going through some things. I didn't know if that was physical, emotional, mental, because usually it's all connected anyways. I just said, sure, let's connect. So I wrote out 2 pages that happened to come through. I'm going to back up for a moment and say, when I write things, and this is a reference to when you guys get messages, it is important to be able to differentiate between the ego and the highest aspect. And that's something that we're always in the process of recognizing. I recognize when I'm in my ego because I get frustrated at the answers that I'm getting. And that's something else that came through, is that a lot of people are going through that frustration where the answers don't make sense or they're not getting the answers. After the session with this particular light worker, we recognized that she was getting the answers, but she was in resistance to the answers that she was getting because they were coming from a different angle. So I might be used to hearing the messages. All of a sudden, I'm not hearing anything, but realistically, I am seeing them, but I'm not interpreting them because my, again, left and right brain, I'm trying to categorize them, put them into a box. And in reality, we are expanding. So some of us that might have been clairaudient are now becoming clairvoyant, and vice versa. And one might go away and the other might come in stronger. Others, it might be both. And we're not used to getting it in this way. Does that make sense? I hope for some people out there listening, I know this will. And for not for everybody, and that's okay. That was part of the other message, is it's not going to always make sense for everybody. So we might have a session with someone and we didn't get the fireworks that we were hoping for. But if we were hoping for fireworks, then that might have been a little bit ego related. We all love to have validation. It feels good when somebody tells us we're not crazy. It feels good when someone says me too, or, oh yeah, that's what I was seeing. And sometimes that's what a healing session is all about, is reassurance. I don't even want to say necessarily the word validation, but reassuring us that we are on the right track, or reassuring us that we're on the wrong track. And then we go, oh, I kind of thought I was on the wrong track, but I needed someone to assist me in recognizing that so that I can then open to the messages that are coming in. So one of the messages that came through with her was see through the stuff that you're looking at. What's right in front of you is an image that we are then, it's blocking us sometimes. And I'm sharing this because this is a message that can be used for all healers right now. Light workers, whoever, moms, dads, sisters, brothers, it doesn't matter. The principle is out. So the old principles that we are used to connecting into of how things worked, why things worked the way they did, who was operating them, it's gone. Even our mechanics and mathematics and physics and science is different than it used to be because we're not in the same dimension that we were. Everything's out the window. Also, this was a reference to the school principal. So we went to school, the principal was the supreme ruler, and we did what the principal told us to do because they were our teacher. But any good teacher wants their student to surpass them, because then it's an exchange, it's energy. You expand, I expand. You expand, I expand. We expand together. So any teacher that doesn't want their student to know more than them is operating somewhere from the ego. The ego can be our friend, and it can show us what is out of alignment. And if we feel like we don't want to share something because it might make someone better than us, then we know that, oh, okay, that's the ego saying this isn't in alignment. As we are coming back to a collective heart coherence, shareable thoughts, shareable waves, shareable energy. And the more telepathic we become, the more transparent we want to be with our feelings and emotions, and the more we want to be in alignment, and the more we want to integrate that ego so that we aren't affecting things in a lower density or bringing a lower density to our reality. So the principal is out. They aren't there anymore. What I wrote down is school's out. Quit calling in the headmistress. Quit calling in the head mistress. This is no longer our mistress. We are no longer just logical beings. That's old energy. That's old news. We now know this is the heart brain. Heart brain. And you guys, this is beyond, well beyond just the heart and the brain. This is many different layers. She is no longer the leader. So she is not, K-N-O-T. When we're looking outside of us for answers, it's great to have a teacher. I will continue to get healing sessions with other light workers because it's always fun and I love to do it. And it assists me in expanding. That doesn't mean they're the boss of me or they know more than I do. They might in that moment, but then all of a sudden I have that session and then I become more expansive than they might have been in that moment. But we help each other. And it's not a competition. I say this with a very non-judgmental way. It's like, oh, I didn't think of that before. Thank you. And hey, have you ever thought of this and felt this way? Oh, wow. It's this inner connectivity that we're all feeding one another through source, from source. And the other message is directly through source. It isn't about going through these other archetypes, these other saints, these other ascended masters, these other entities. And why feed them that frequency when we're all in this together? We are already connected to the same information system and the same information source. And while we might want to connect in with Buddha and say, hey, what's up, Buddha? Let's talk, let's play. Buddha is not any higher up in a hierarchy than we are. However, there are times when we want to refer to the teachings of Siddhartha and Buddha because we might, in that moment, expand from it. But it doesn't mean we're putting them on a pedestal anymore or saying, I worship this particular deity, entity, being because it is more advanced than I am. That is duality. That is something that is then we are projecting onto something else. So we're projecting a concept of who they are. And that then creates separation. And that then also creates this feeling of us not being worthy for how could we possibly know as a lowly human what this teacher knows? Because we all come from the same source. We may not know it in this linear moment, but if we allow ourselves to expand and to integrate, we then remember these things. And that's what we're in the process of doing in Ascension, is remembering this. It isn't always going to be clear cut, and that's where these teachers assist us. But then we become the teachers. We have become the teachers. Quit calling in the headmistress. These beings are no longer the leaders. You guys, this is also in reference to political, religious, all of it. We've all got the same book. We've all got access to the same books. Read it on our own and see what resonates with us, not what somebody else tells us necessarily what it means. Although it can be helpful at times to connect in with that, we are being invited to kind of get away from this worship. And you guys, that's a play on words. Worship, outside of us, we're the past. We are the masters of our own ship. I just did a video about this. And I'd written down like these people that have been made saints within our reality system for doing what they did. It's time for us to be the saints. It's time for us to, school's out. So operating from our highest aspect, we become in that same view because we are leading by example, just as they led by example. But we can still honor them. And honoring them, there's nothing wrong with that, of course. And everything has a time and a place, so to speak. But where are we putting them in place of is the question that's coming through and what came through in this session. Now, I'm going to back up for a moment. Many personal things came through in this session that, of course, I'm not going to share because everybody's different. We all have our own physical ailments. We all have our own physical presentations of things, and it's different for everyone. Some people, it's about letting go of their past. Others, it's not about thinking about their future so much. It's always about being present. But I might hone in with somebody and see that they're living in the past constantly. I might hone in with somebody else and say they are living what's next, what's next, what's next. And they're not even looking at what their past has taught them. So everybody's different. And that's not where we're going with this. I'm just talking about what came through for a lot of people out there that I thought it could be helpful. I was talking a little bit about retrograde and retrospect. For this particular person, the message was she must align with no thing. Now, this is for everybody. We are being invited not to put our energy into stuff, trinkets. I always like to refer back to the movie The Labyrinth, because there's a scene in The Labyrinth, Jim Henson, right? Where, sorry, spoiler alert if you guys haven't seen this movie, but she wakes up, she thinks she busts out of the matrix, she busts out of the bubble, she wakes up and and I've used this example before, she wakes up and she thinks she's back in her home. She's in her bedroom and she's awake, and all of a sudden, things just don't quite seem right. And she recognizes that she never really came out of the matrix. She just woke up in another bubble, and it was a false front thinking she woke up out of the matrix. And this little puppet, this little character is trying to distract her with all of the things that make her feel like she's at home. Like the snow globe that's in her bedroom, and the calendar, and this, oh look, this thing is what your dad gave you, and look, this is, and it's a distraction. So even us praying every day to the same deity can be a distraction if we're putting more value in that deity than we are in our own self, our own connection to source, our own stock. So what happened with this particular individual, and this is happening again with a lot of people, is I was seeing this, not quite understanding it all. I trusted what I wrote down had something to do with what's going on in her life, and surely enough it did. She had a lot of things around her that she informed me that she had 2 altars, one she had in the morning and one she kind of had out in her house. So she had a personal altar, and it was beautiful. She has it set up with Ganesh and Mother Mary, and she's traveled all over the world and has Buddhas from everywhere. And the message that came through was, from my aspect, was to start getting rid of some of that. Start letting it go, because there's been a little too much value, a little too much placed upon worldly representations of higher frequencies. Their energy is not in a trinket. Their energy is not in... Now, crystals are a completely different thing, because crystals are living frequencies, but I'm talking about like a statue. And it's good to have a reminder. There comes a point when there might be too many, though. So how much are we linking again, this is cords. It creates cords, and it creates a stagnation when we have too much stuff that